You're listening to CherryPickin Entertainment.
Throw me the ball and watch what I do with it.
You are now tuned into the CherryPickin podcast with your host, Andre Cherry.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Thank you for downloading another episode of the CherryPickin podcast. I'm your host, Andre Cherry, and on today's episode, I want to talk about the games that we've got lined up for Week 1. So the top games within the Power 5 conferences, or Power 4 conferences, that is, that have my attention for Week 1 action, and there are surprisingly some big games taking place in the first week of the season, and this is no different than we've seen in previous years. We get some of the big marquee matchups early on in the season, which is great, which is awesome. It's competitive right away. We're not getting the cupcake FCS teams playing FBS teams, and you do get that on occasion. But the fact that we're already starting the Week 1 of the season with premier matchups, it just really makes the whole experience of watching college football that much more enjoyable, that we get it that early. And we're about a month away from kickoff for the first game, and so this episode is really just meant to be a primer for Week 1 action, and I just want to talk about some of the games that have my attention. And we'll start Saturday, August 24th. In the ACC, we get Florida State versus Georgia Tech. Florida State and Georgia Tech open up the college football season with a conference matchup that will be one of the premier games on that date, on August 24th, which also marks the start of the college football season. This game is being played in Aviva Stadium in Dublin. So that's pretty cool. We've seen some matchups in previous years. I think Northwestern played there a couple years. Nebraska played there. This year it looks like the ACC gets that opportunity, and they put Florida State and Georgia Tech together in a conference game right in Week 1 of the regular season. Coming into this matchup, Florida State is on a 12-game ACC winning streak, if you did not know that. These two teams last met in 2022, where the Noles handed the Yellow Jackets the 41-16 loss. For this season opener, I don't see it getting as lopsided as the 2022 contest was, especially because I think there are some holes on FSU's defense that will need to get plugged, but that should be a fun game to watch. A big-time matchup in the ACC, Florida State versus Georgia Tech. I'm really excited to see what Florida State comes out with. They lost a lot of talent, but Florida State is a team that everybody is hoping that they continue to form. They had great back-to-back 10-win seasons. Could Florida State continue that trend? It all begins in Week 1 action versus Georgia Tech, so we'll have to wait and see. Then on Thursday, August 29th, we've got North Carolina versus Minnesota. UNC makes its first trip to Minneapolis to face the Golden Gophers, and they're hoping to get a second straight win against the Big Ten foe. Last year, the ranked Tar Heels beat Minnesota by a score of 31-13. This year, UNC is going to have to go at it without superstar quarterback Drake May, who is now in the NFL with the New England Patriots. The Tar Heels will lean heavily on running back Omarion Hampton, who led the team with over 1,500 yards rushing and 15 touchdowns. On the other side of the ball, linebacker Power Echols, that is a great name, by the way, Power Echols, returns as one of the leaders of the defense. Looking at the Tar Heels' schedule, I definitely feel as if Carolina has a shot to go 7-0 before they meet Florida State on November 2nd. UNC has a very manageable schedule this year, so they have a shot to run things early, but I also don't want to overlook James Madison on September 21st. James Madison is a good squad. They were always solid on the FCS level, but I think James Madison may give them a little bit of trouble. But outside of that, I mean, I think realistically UNC could probably run things until they get to Florida State later in the season. Minnesota, they'll win this game against UNC if they row their boats together to victory. I'm just joking on that, but it truly is hard to believe that PJ Fleck is already in his 8th season with the Golden Gophers. It truly feels like he just got there. It's crazy this is his 8th year. I really can't even believe that. Last year, his squad went 6-7 in what can be considered somewhat of a down year. Minnesota came off back-to-back 9-win seasons heading into the start of 2023, and last season the offense and defense were ranked in the bottom half of the Big Ten statistically. There are some playmakers who returned this season, including running backs Darius Taylor and Jordan Newman, who combined to rush for over 1,300 yards last year. Minnesota, I'm not saying they're like Wisconsin, but Minnesota runs the ball very well, very effectively. They've had some great running backs in their program's history, but Minnesota runs the ball extremely well. They got big linemen, big boys up front, and I think this year they'll be able to run the ball effectively as well. But for this game, if I'm being real, I think UNC beats Minnesota handedly. PJ Fleck is a coach of the future, no doubt, but I give the edge to Mac Brown in this one. He'll have his UNC players ready to roll Minnesota big time. Then on Friday, August 30th, we've got Temple versus Oklahoma, and I wish they were playing this game at the Link this season where the Owls play its home games. And the Link, for people that don't know, it's Lincoln Financial Field, but here we call it the Link, and that's where the Philadelphia Eagles play. Anywho, Oklahoma will make it a very long day for Coach Stan Drayton and his Temple Owls. If you didn't know, the overall series is split between these two schools 1-1, but the last matchup came back in 1942. This year's matchup is the first game in a 3-game series the two schools agreed upon back in 2016. And if we look at 2016, if we go back in time, in 2016, Temple posted its second straight 10-win season under head coach Matt Rule, who's now with Nebraska. But Temple football back then was a big deal. Temple football was legit. Rutgers was down. There weren't any other programs that were competing on that level. Temple was ranked in 2016. They were a team that everybody was pushing for. College Game Day came out here in Philly. So Temple was big business in football back in 2016. But since that time, however, the Owls have only had 3 winning seasons in the last 7 years. Said a different way, Temple has posted 4 straight losing seasons, averaging 2.5 wins during that stretch. Next season, OU will travel up to Philly to play Temple to a sold-out crowd, which I will hopefully be at that game. But after that, these two teams won't meet again until the 2028 season. So I'll be a much older CherryPickin by that time in 2028. But it's been a rough stretch for Stan Drayton and his Owls, who have only been able to muster 3 wins each of the last 2 seasons. His superstar quarterback, E.J. Warner, the son of Kurt Warner, NFL superstar, Hall of Famer, E.J. transferred out of the program and only 10 starters returned this year. They will be overmatched and overpowered by the Sooners, who will likely put up over 550 yards of total offense in this game. And while this is a non-conference matchup, I do think the Sooners will seize the opportunity to start their season on a hot note, considering they'll officially be starting SEC play a few weeks later against Tennessee. And for Temple, I'm sure a blowout loss to the Sooners won't do anything to quell the haters from bringing up talk again that the university should end the football program. And you can go on Twitter and social media to see what I'm talking about. I feel like last season, you had some reporters or some people close to the game, some personalities in sports saying that Temple should end the program at Temple. People thought that was a little crazy, it's a little ridiculous, but I'm sure if Temple gets blown out by the Sooners, we'll hear those talks come up again. And if they have a bad season, I'm sure we'll hear that talk again, because Temple's projected to be last place in the American Conference this year, which is it's tough to see that, especially for a team that had been solid for the last several years. Coaching turmoil, and I think they brought in a coach that did nothing to help the program. He was only out for himself. He destroyed that program. Stan Drayton has the tough job of trying to restore things and get some continuity in place and some good coaching behaviors in place and just try to do it his way, but it hasn't looked good thus far. So I don't know. If Temple can keep it close, I think that's a good sign going forward. I mean, Temple's glory days seem to be a long lost memory these days, but if Stan can rally his guys in this game and keep it close, I do think that's a huge morale booster going forward. Right now, though, I want to take a quick timeout. We just talked about the top games that I got circled on my calendar from August 24th through the 30th. On the other side of this break, I want to talk about the games that I've got lined up that I'm going to be glued on the couch for on August 31st. So don't go anywhere. The CherryPickin podcast will be right back after a short break.
I want some nasty.
Are you a member of San Antonio Spurs Nation? If you are, stand up. If you are, stand up. That's right, because this is a Bucking Spurs podcast. I am Robert Trejo Jr., your host here at ABSP, and here we're talking all things San Antonio Spurs basketball, baby. We'll talk NBA as well. We'll have occasional guest hosts dropping in from time to time. You can find us on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher Podcasts, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, wherever you get your podcast jam on, we are there. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube for special Spurs content. And you already know what it is. Go Spurs, go.
In 1957, Laika became the first animal to orbit Earth. What kind of animal was Laika?
What is the only team in the Big Four North American sports leagues which shares its name with one of the Avengers?
And here's one more question for you. Are you the type of person who enjoys playing trivia games, learning new things, and having a bit of fun along the way?
If you are, or if you just want to find out the answers to those other questions, then our podcast, Quiz and Hers, might be right up your alley.
Each week, one of us writes new trivia questions for the other person, covering everything from science to history to pop culture to sports.
And every question in a game relates to some theme, like Game of Thrones,
Internet memes,
sandwiches,
or animals in space.
Some of the themes make more sense than others.
So if you like trivia, learning, or real couples testing each other's knowledge and patience, check out our podcast, Quiz and Hers.
Quiz and Hers, the trivia podcast where we test each other's knowledge and the strength of our relationship.
Basketball is back. And with that comes joy, tension, heartbreak, buzzer beaters, and elation. It's time to be courtside for every one of those moments, no matter where your team is playing. Short Court specializes in making replica and custom basketball courts for your home, office, sports cave to decorate your walls with all those memories. If you have a picture, we can recreate it. Featured in the 2021 UniWatch Holiday Gift Guide, short courts are made using real wood. We frame and give them an epoxy finish to protect the new centerpiece of your memorabilia collection. With previous customers including Northern Kentucky University, Southern Utah University, 199 Apparel, The Perimeter Podcast with Adam Morrison, and many more celebrating the careers and retirements of their coaches, it's time you visit shortcourts.com for more info and a gallery of our work, or you can send us an email, info@shortcourts.com. Be sure to find us on social media, just search for Short Courts. It's time to bring the home court home.
Okay. Now I want to talk about the games that I've got glued on my calendar for Saturday, August 31st. We've got Clemson versus Georgia. This is a big-time matchup against two schools that may be playing for a chance to make the playoffs this season in their respective conferences. The last time these two teams met, number 5 Georgia got the 10-3 victory over number 3 Clemson in the season opener back in 2021, which was also the same season that Georgia won the national championship. Now, I'm sure Kirby Smart would love a similar ending for this season, but Georgia's schedule is tough, so their journey to the college football playoffs won't be easy. For Clemson, the Tigers are coming off a down season, even though they posted 9 wins last season, which is a great season for most teams, but at Clemson, the bar has been risen dramatically ever since Dabo Swinney has been at the controls. Clemson had posted 12 straight 10-plus win seasons prior to last season. That is ridiculous. 12 straight 10-win seasons. That is crazy. Clemson is going to be a tough out for a lot of teams in the ACC this season. As the team returns a lot of offensive firepower this fall, I think this matchup between Clemson and Georgia is going to be extremely tight and should be a fun game to watch. Regardless of the outcome, these two teams have a great shot of winning their respective conferences this season and may wind up seeing each other again in the playoffs before the season ends. Then we've got Texas A&M versus Notre Dame. This is an interesting matchup this season, especially when you consider that former Duke head coach Mike Elko is now coaching for Texas A&M, and his former starting quarterback at Duke, Riley Leonard, is now the presumed starter for Notre Dame. Texas A&M and Notre Dame are in different places from a literal and figurative standpoint. Expectations are sky high for Notre Dame to reach the playoffs under head coach Marcus Freeman, now in his 3rd season in South Bend. Freeman has been a good coach, winning at least 9 games his first 2 seasons, but if Notre Dame doesn't make the playoffs this season, I feel as if he won't be long for the job, unfortunately. Notre Dame travels to College Station for this matchup, and if Mike Elko can steal a win from the Irish in his first season and first game for the Aggies, I feel as if that's a huge confidence builder for not only him and his team, but everyone who supports that program. After all, Elko has only been a head coach for 2 full seasons, but he was highly successful at Duke, posting 17 combined wins and knocking off teams such as Miami, Virginia Tech, Clemson, NC State, and Wake Forest twice during that stretch. Elko's Duke team even played a ranked Notre Dame squad very hard last season, losing that game but remaining within 7 points of victory. I say all that because Elko knows what it will take to beat Notre Dame, and he arguably has a better roster with Texas A&M than he did with Duke, and he's got 18 returning starters at A&M, so I think this matchup between Texas A&M and Notre Dame will actually be very, very close. So circle that game on your calendars. That will be a fun watch. Then we've got Florida versus Miami. This is another big matchup between 2 in-state opponents who play in the SEC and ACC respectively. The Gators have definitely seen better days down there in the swamp, especially after coming off a losing season. Head coach Billy Napier returns 14 starters, which should help to build continuity. But the Gator schedule is brutal. I'm not even sure if they'll best their 5-7 record from a season ago, especially when they open up against Miami. The Hurricanes are also waiting for their own breakthrough, which may come this season in Mario Cristobal's 3rd year back at his alma mater. Miami's schedule looks good. They have a chance to go on a run in the ACC. The Canes welcome in transfer quarterback Cam Ward to the program, who put up some big numbers for Washington State last season. And now that I say that, Cam Ward, do you remember that movie, The Program? Cam Ward, I believe his name was Cam Ward. He was a player, and I don't even think he had a speaking role. He was just, I remember Ward in the movie, in The Program, with Halle Berry, James Caan, Omar Epps, Christy Swanson. That movie was crazy. I love that movie. One of my favorite movies of all time. Cam Ward was a wide receiver for the Wolves, if I'm remembering that correctly. And I recalled that memory out of nowhere because of the name Cam Ward. And I believe that's what the player's name was. And he was just a wide receiver in the movie, but he wasn't really, he was like an extra, but he didn't have a speaking role. So I sorry I had to divert like that, but the memory just popped in my head. That's a great movie, by the way. If you haven't seen it, you should go watch The Program. I love that movie. Anyways, they welcome in quarterback Cam Ward to the program. He put up some big numbers for Washington State last season. I think it'll be an upgrade to former quarterback Tyler Van Dyke, if I'm being for real. Tyler Van Dyke, he was a good quarterback, but he was more interception prone than Ward has been in his early career so far. The top 2 wide receivers for Miami return, which will help Ward settle in quite nicely. And on the other side of the ball, linebacker Francisco Maui Noah returns and will be an anchor of the defense. If Miami is going to break through to the next level, it has to happen this season, and I think Miami pulls off the victory in this matchup and goes on a run in the ACC because they really need it to bring that program back to respectability. Then we've got Penn State versus West Virginia. I mentioned it on my last podcast episode, but I think West Virginia has a really tough schedule this season, and opening college football play against Penn State in week 1 is not going to be fun. If we look at this series, Penn State holds the record with 35 wins to only 2 losses. That is crazy. The Nittany Lions are also currently riding a 5-game win streak over the Mountaineers. Head coach James Franklin will benefit from having quarterback Drew Allar return in addition to the top 3 rushers from a season ago. The offensive line will be serviceable, but they did lose some experience with players who have now gone on to the NFL. I believe from an offensive standpoint, Penn State has the ability to overpower West Virginia, and the defense will be anchored by linebacker Kobe King and safety Kevin Winston. These 2 guys accounted for 119 tackles last season. Penn State has a chance to be 6-0 before they travel to Wisconsin on October 26th. I truly believe that. But the biggest question is, can the Nittany Lions finish the job in the second half of the season where Ohio State awaits on November 2nd? Whoever wins that game will likely be able to dictate their own future in the Big Ten. So Penn State always starts off hot, but can they finish? That has been the thing that has plagued James Franklin for his entire tenure there up in Happy Valley. So if Penn State can get off to a good start and keep that momentum and keep winning, I think Penn State has a good shot to make it to the playoffs this year. That'd be crazy. Then lastly, the last game that I've got kind of glued on my calendar for August 31st, we've got Iowa versus Illinois State. I would love if ISU could pull off the unlikely upset against the Iowa Hawkeyes. This game is a bit of a family rivalry matchup for my family, as my younger sister graduated from Iowa and I graduated from the Illinois State University. Roll damn Redbirds! This game will have huge bragging rights within my family this season. These two teams last met back in 2015 when my Redbirds made the 192-mile trip up to battle the Hawkeyes. In that matchup, my beloved Redbirds lost by a score of 31-14. I would love if ISU could give the Hawkeyes a run for their money. However, I'm not too sure about that. Head coach Kirk Ferentz is now in his 26th season at the program, and he returns a lot of talent on both sides of the ball. This game could be ugly for the ISU faithful, but I hope all my friends and former classmates and people close to the program who are going up for that game, I hope they have a good time. I wish I was in the Midwest to catch that game, to be close to it and roll up there. I don't think I'm going to be making the trip to Iowa City, which is a fun town, but I hope Illinois State has a great time and hopefully they can shock the world and get an upset victory. That would be fantastic. Well, there we have it, my friends. That was my new podcast episode for this week. Just wanted to preview the games in week 1 action coming up here in about a month away. We've got games beginning on August 24th. Whew, we are almost there. But thank you for downloading this episode. I appreciate you listening to this. I hope it gets you ready and you learn something about some of these schools. And I can't wait to talk to you in the near future. Take care, everybody. Have a good one. Peace. As my younger sister graduated from Iowa and I graduated from the Illinois State University. Roll damn Redbirds! Thank you again for tuning into my Cherry Pickin' podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to subscribe to my show and drop me a rating on Apple Podcasts. All of my digital content can be found at the website CherryPickinSports.com. And if you are looking to interact with me via social media, my Twitter handle is @Cherry_Pickin. That's PICKIN. On my Twitter, you'll also find a link to my blog where I post my weekly college football predictions and analysis. I can also be reached via email at cherrypickinsports@gmail.com. Please feel free to reach out to me regarding what you like about this podcast or about what content you'd like to hear more of on future episodes. I sincerely thank you for your support, and I can't wait to talk to you again soon. Take care.